Welcome to the Making Connections webinar series. This webinar is presented by the Fall Prevention Community of Practice with technology support from the Seniors Health Knowledge Network. My name is Lindsay Toth and I am a project coordinator at the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation, which sponsors the COP. Rhonda Lovell also joins us on the line. She is one of the core team co-chairs for the Community of Practice, and she'll be assisting with the webinar technology. Before we begin, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on the Level 3 web meeting system. This webinar technology consists of two parts. The audio is provided through a telephone conference line, and the visuals are provided through a web platform. The phone number for the conference line and the link for the web platform were sent to you by email after you registered for the webinar with Level 3. If you have questions about the technology at any time during the presentation, please type them into the chat box located on the left-hand side of your screen. Alternatively, you can send me an email to lindsay@onf.org, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you have questions about the content of the webinar, you may also type those into the chat box during the presentation. During the Q&A, I will read those questions aloud to the presenter. If you'd prefer to ask your question over the phone, you may unmute your line by dialing *7 when prompted. When you're finished, please just dial *6 to remute your line and eliminate background noise. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today, Nancy Willis. Nancy is a certified pedorthist and the owner of her own business, Computer Engineered Orthotics. So welcome, Nancy. You may unmute your line by dialing *7 now.
Hi, Lindsay, and hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today to share my passion for feet with you. I'm a certified pedorthist, and I have a really special interest in falls prevention and in diabetes foot care. And just to give you an idea of what pedorthists do, we deal with the devices and the footwear that support the foot, so that's whatever shoes you wear, and if you have foot orthotics, whether they be custom or otherwise. I'm often asked the difference between a pedorthist and a podiatrist. And here in Canada, we interchange podiatrist and chiropodist. We use them interchangeably. And I would say that they deal with the guts of the foot, so the bones and the muscles and the skin and the nails. And I deal with the devices that support the foot. Today, I won't be speaking in technical terms or medicalese. It'll be really, really simple, as though I were speaking to the community. So this is going to be in really simple terms. So this is what today looks like. So why are your feet important? What do your feet do for you? Your amazing foot, how your foot is constructed to do that work, what our responsibility is in terms of sole care tips and nail care woes, shoe shopping, how do we pick shoes to help our feet do the work they're supposed to do, and then at the very end, the linkage of foot health, body health, and mental health. Okay, so let's just go on to why your feet are important. And I'd like you to just think about these questions. You can write down the answers if you'd like. So, do you have difficulty doing your own foot care? What size shoe do you wear, width and length? When did you have your feet measured last? Do you have trouble finding comfortable shoes? Okay, so let's experience why your feet are important. Most people are born with healthy feet. As we age, we tend to think that this just developed, and we've had it, for a long time. I want to make sure that people understand that it's as we age that problems develop, and making sure that we have healthy, pain-free feet helps with keeping balance and allowing us to stay active. And we all know all those really good things with walking, weight control, blood clot prevention, keeping bones and muscles strong. And if you're checking your feet daily, you're also getting a really good heads up on anything that might be coming down the line, diabetes, arthritis, nerve damage. I just want to make it really clear that everything I talk about today is in relation to staying active and preventing falls. So for a healthy lifestyle, we should all be walking at least 10,000 steps. And as people age, perhaps that could be lowered to between 5,000 and 7,000. You can use a pedometer to keep track of how many steps you're walking. Pedometers can be shared between people. They can be borrowed from lending libraries. I know in Kingston we have a lending library. And if you mark your route, then you know how many steps you're taking. It can also be really encouraging to know how much you've done, and also an incentive to get moving and doing more. And feet are really important because we're only given one pair, and those feet move an awful lot of weight. They move not only the weight we have as individuals, but they also have to deal with the fact that the earth sucks. So gravity is really a big player in this. And with every ordinary step, there's 1.5 times your body weight on your feet. And if you do anything more active, sports, dancing, playing tennis, that can triple or quadruple. And I always think of the 200-pound man. If it's 1.5 times, he's putting 300 pounds on his feet. And if you figure that he's doing 7,000 steps in a day times 7 days times 4 weeks times 12 months, that's a tremendous amount of weight that's going on the feet. And when you think about it, your feet are not completely on the ground all at the same time, and nor are both feet, for the most part, on the ground at the same time when you're walking, etc. So lots of weight is being moved when you're using your feet. I really like this quote from Leonardo about the foot being the greatest engineering device in the world. So let's see, with all that work that your feet have to do, the weight that they have to hold up and support, and the walking that you have to do or the movement, how they're constructed or structured so that they can do this work. The foot looks really simple, but it is very complex. 26 bones, 20 muscles, 35 joints, and then the ligaments. It also has the 4 arches, and the arches are really important. And if you look at your slide, you'll see arrows indicating the 4 arches. Arches are impressive because they hold up an awful lot of weight. And if you look at building construction, you'll see that they use arches or keystones to support the arches. And our feet have 4 of them in order to support the weight and the sucking of the earth that they have to deal with. All of those 26 little bones have to work in concert with one another in order to allow a step to take place. So you can see that if one arch is not working the way it should, or one bone is out of place slightly, then you have a foot that's not working the way it should be. Interesting fact, if you add 26 and 26, so the bones in both of your feet, you have 1/4 of the bones in your entire body. It's pretty impressive when you think about it. So your foot has to do 3 jobs for you. The first job is to act as a shock absorber. So when your heel strikes down, it's absorbing the shock. For those of us who have flat feet, we know how good our feet are at shock absorbing. People who have higher arches will find maybe not so much. And the second job is to act as a mobile adapter. And this helps if you're walking on gravel or on grass or on concrete, if you're going up a hill or down a hill. And the third job that your foot does for you is act as a rigid lever, and that really works well for someone who has a high arch. That rigid foot can propel forward really well. Those of us with a flatter foot find that we're not so good at it. But those are the three jobs: shock absorber, mobile adapter, and rigid lever. So we've looked at the work that your foot does, how your foot is constructed to do that work. Let's have a look now at the responsibility for us in looking after our feet. Okay, so important that you wash and dry your feet daily. Even if you don't get in the tub or the shower for washing the rest of your body, make sure that you get your feet washed every day and use a warm water and a mild soap, not hot water. I've had people tell me they use hot water, and that really is not a good thing if you have any impairment to circulation or feeling in your feet. And important to dry your feet really, really well. I would suggest having a chair handy. Don't want you to fall over as you're trying to get those feet dried. So use a towel to dry between your toes, or use a device like the one in the picture, available at Shoppers, not very expensive, and works a charm. The reason you want to make sure that things are really dry, or the spaces between your toes are really dry, is that there isn't much air circulation, and any moisture trapped there, it'll be a hot, moist, dark environment, and bugs just love it. So use a towel or a face cloth, have a chair, and don't use very hot water, just warm water. While you're sitting on the chair, check your feet for problem areas. So you're looking for cracks, you're looking for corns and calluses and perhaps toenails that are ingrowing. If you can't bend over and take a look yourself, get someone to help you or use a mirror, and you'll see on the far left there are some samples of mirrors. Most of those I got at the dollar store. If you're worried about lowering the mirror to the ground, use a string and just let it down. If you see any of these things and you're diabetic or you have impaired feeling or circulation to your feet, you need to see a foot care professional immediately. Very important that you take care of those things. Okay, so after you've washed your feet and made sure they're really dry, then you apply a moisturizer. And again, not between the toes because you don't want to trap the moisture. I use Vaseline Problem Skin Therapy, but there are lots of creams out there that you can use. And make sure that you blot the excess cream off with either paper towel or face cloth. You don't want to put a damp foot into your sock or your shoe. And then we come to nail care. So when it's time to do your nail care, you should be using a clipper or a scissor, and you'll see the little white-handled scissor there on the bottom diagram. You can use that, or the clipper on the left at the top, in the top picture. And when you're looking at that picture, I hope you can notice the difference between the cutting edges on those clippers. You want to use the straight edge. And for the most part, people want to cut straight across, not down in the corners of the edges. That will encourage nails to ingrow. I would suggest anyone who has diabetes or, again, the impaired feeling or circulation in their feet to see a healthcare professional. Healthcare professionals, when they're doing your feet, are looking at your feet from a different angle, and they can see the nichium, and they won't cut it. You don't want any bleeding to happen. My suggestion as well to people is when they see a healthcare professional or a foot care professional, to make sure that that professional is not cutting their nails too short. I know why they do it. They are only going to be seen every 6 weeks, but you don't want any bleeding to occur. Also in that picture are crystal nail files. I think people should be using those crystal nail files to smooth the rough edges on their nails rather than the metal. Metal can easily cut the skin, so you don't want that to happen. Please do not use where the arrow points at that nipper, that's a very sharp instrument. Leave those sharp instruments to healthcare professionals. You don't want to do any damage to your feet. And please don't use corn pads. I remember for years my mother used corn pads on her corns, and the acetylsalicylic acid in the corn pad will damage the healthy tissue along with the corn. See a healthcare professional for control of those corns rather than a chemical. Okay, and I know when you have a callus, it feels like a little stone in your shoe, so you need to deal with those calluses, but not with razors or Dremels. Leave those to the professional. You can use a pumice or a foot file. And keep in mind that calluses and corns happen because either your shoe is too narrow or there's excess pressure at particular spots, and the skin just builds up protection for itself. It gets thicker. So you need to deal with those, but be very careful about that using the pumice or the foot file. Please don't use heating pads, hot water bottles, or electric blankets. They can do damage to your skin, especially if there's an impairment of feeling. Wear socks instead, and we women tend to be really one of the worst when it comes to wearing socks. You can see there it says socks that don't have too much elastic, and we all tend to wear the knee-high nylons that bite into our legs, and that does impair your circulation. Diabetic socks are not just for diabetics. We can wear them as well. Save your nylons for the fancy times, and for every day, wear a sock that's loose at the top. Be really careful, though, when you're looking at diabetic socks. If you look inside, sometimes you'll see all kinds of threads and seams and things, and you want to avoid those because they'll act as an irritant inside your shoe.
I wear them.
Okay, so now we're getting on to what I like to call the fun stuff. I really have fun with shoe shopping. I guess it's my desire to do retail therapy all the time. So this you will have as a handout. It's called Shoe Shopping or Shoe Evaluation 101. When you walk into a store and you're completely floored because all you see is walls of shoes, this will help you to narrow things down to a more supportive shoe. So if you start with number 2 on that page, you can see that by pushing on either side of your heel cup, you will be able to either push it right so your fingers come together or just a tiny little bit. What you're looking for is the tiny little bit. You want your heel to be held really securely in the heel cup, because when your heel strikes, that's when your footstep happens, and you want your foot to be properly supported. And then if you check out number 3, when you push on the front of the shoe, if the shoe bends or folds back past where your toes would bend to push off, if it pushes back into the heel, then you've got too much flexion there, and the front of your foot is not going to be properly supported.
That's bad.
And then if you go back to number 1, I call this the dish rag test. So if you take the shoe, one hand at the heel, one hand at the forefoot, and wring it as though you were wringing out a dish rag, if it completely twists, then there's way too much flexion there, and you really need to have something that doesn't wring out quite as well. You want a little wet dish rag, not a completely damp one. So just to give you a comparison, and I'm not saying that this shoe doesn't have its place, but you can see the difference here with this shoe. You've got the heel cup that completely collapses, the forefoot that completely moves into the back of the shoe, and when you twist the shoe, it twists completely like you would a dish rag. So this shoe is great. It's lightweight, so if you travel a lot, this shoe will go nicely into a suitcase and not cost you extra money at the airport. You can use it in the house, in the garden, or if your muscles are really weak in your legs and feet and you need something that's lightweight. But please don't use this type of shoe for walking any distances or think that it's going to give your foot some support. Let's move on to how to shoe shop. Try on shoes at the end of the day, at the end of your week. I used to say Monday through Friday, so you needed to shoe shop on Friday afternoon, but I realized that often people are busy on the weekend. So if you have a bazaar or a family reunion or something that you do on the weekend, Monday morning may be the end of your week. So think about when the end of your week is, and that's when you want to buy your shoes. If you buy shoes on Monday morning and you wear them all week, you may find that they don't fit quite so well because our feet do get bigger as the week goes on. And be prepared to spend at least an hour. Don't try and wedge your shoe shopping in between other appointments or after you've had drops put in your eye at the optometrist and you have some time to kill before you have to go back. Spend dedicated time. And wear when you're trying on the shoes, wear the socks that you're going to be wearing. So tuck a pair of athletic shoes into your purse if you're going to be trying on athletic shoes, or take along a knee-high so you have a knee-high with you if you're going to be trying on a fancier shoe. But shoes and socks really work in concert, so you need to have both of them there to get an idea of the fit that you want. This next one about the half-inch or the thumb width sometimes throws people. They think, holy smokes, that's a lot of space to have at the end, but that gives your foot some place to move to when you're walking because your foot will inch forward very slightly as you walk. And I'm going to ask you a question at this point. Think about your own feet and whether or not you have a longer second toe. And I'm going to give you the old wives' wisdom about longer second toes. You're smart, you're beautiful, you're fast, and as one lady said to me, you're bossy. So you pick which one works for you. But you have to be careful when you're having your feet measured, and then when you're buying the shoe, that 1/2 inch or the thumb's width comes after the longest toe, not after your great toe. And we're going to talk later about the depth of a shoe, and it may not be that the shoe is too long, it may just be that it's deep, and I'll give you some ideas about what you can do about that. And make sure you take your orthotics with you and then take the liner out of the shoe and put the orthotic in, because again, the orthotics will act in concert with the shoe in order to give you the proper support. So you want to know what that feels like, and you want to make sure that they work well together to do the jobs they're supposed to be doing for you. And these are Brannock devices. People tell me you don't often find them anymore in shoe stores, but look for a shoe store that has them and get your feet measured. And get your feet measured when you're standing. Your feet do change shape when you stand up. They get longer and they get wider. That also happens as we age. We all have to think about that gravity sucking thing. Our butts aren't where they were when we were 21, and so I guess maybe our feet aren't where they were when we were 21. Just something to think about. So I've told you that you need to have your feet measured, and they should be measured every time you get new shoes. But this is only going to be a guideline. The Brannock device measures the length and the width of your foot, but it doesn't measure the depth of your foot. So your foot may be thick and it may be shallow, and that may have some influence on the sizing that you need for your foot. And besides which, manufacturers all have different ways of sizing. New Balance shoes traditionally size their shoes a 1/2 inch to a half size to a full size smaller than other shoes. So I wear an 8.5 in most shoes. but in New Balance, I wear a 9 or a 9.5. So it's a starting point, but you really need to try the shoes on and make sure they're working for you. And just as an added little bit of information, the instep is the top of your foot, the arch is the bottom of your foot. Remember to be measured to the end of the longest toe. And if you're looking at 2 different sizes of feet, make sure that you fit the longest foot, and then we can make some revisions to the shorter, to the other shoe so that it fits the shorter foot. And people notoriously buy shoes that are too long in order to get the width, and if that's the case, you're likely to catch your toe, and that's really a tripping and falling hazard. So better to find a shoe that fits the width of your foot, and when you put your foot in the shoe, the widest part of your foot should be at the widest part of the shoe. You can apply the shoe support evaluation test we just talked about, and make sure that the shoe is going to be working for you. So if you're going to be using these shoes to walk. If you're going to be going to a class in the gym, do all of the moves that you're going to be making so that you have a really good feel for that shoe. Make sure that you check the shoe for the sole shape and for any manufacturing defects. If you look at the back of the shoe at the heel cup and there's a seam there and it's cockeyed, it means it's a Monday or a Friday shoe, and everything will be joined together incorrectly and your foot will feel it. So just check those things out. When you're shopping for shoes, I think it's really important to have a good relationship, a trust relationship with the person who's selling those shoes to you or making recommendations. So just make sure that you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, then make an excuse, come back another time, or ask to see someone else. These are your feet and this is your money, so make sure you trust that when the person says you need this particular shoe, that you really do believe that it's your shoe. Shoes are very expensive, so make sure that you understand what the return policy is and what the conditions are in that particular store. And please don't let me hear anybody say, I'm going to break these shoes in. I remember hearing that as a little kid, and nowadays you don't have to break shoes in. I can guarantee that the shoes will break you first before you break them. So make sure they're comfortable in the store. We're often pulled in by something we really love, or it's on sale, or everybody's wearing it, but really buy comfortable shoes. Now we want to look at some qualities, and you will find there is a handout for Shoe Shopping 101 and Shoe Shopping 101 for diabetics that you will be able to print off. So you'll be able to find all of these suggestions there. You need to be wearing your shoes. Frequently when we're at home, we think that we don't have to wear shoes, but there are breadcrumbs and staples and things, and any impairments in the feeling or circulation in your feet won't let you know that. But even if you don't have that issue, those issues, when you're walking and you step on something like a crumb or a staple, that can cause you to go off balance, and then there's the chance of a fall. Making sure your shoes are laced properly is really important. If your laces are loose, there's a tripping hazard. And if your foot is not secure in the shoe, your foot will be moving around, and again, the chances of a fall increase. I know there are budgetary concerns, so replacing your shoes frequently can be an issue. Keep saving up so that you can replace those shoes. I've had gentlemen tell me that they've polished their shoes and looked after them for 20 years and they're wonderful, but really anything that's good or supportive about the shoe is no longer there, so you really need to be replacing your shoes. And making sure that you wear socks. When your foot is moving slightly inside your shoe, there's going to be friction and shear, and the socks just add that barrier between you and the shoe. So be sure that you're wearing shoes. Even when you're outside on the pool deck or in the garden, have a water shoe or something that you can wear out there that's appropriate. Just keep those feet protected. This also is a sheet that you can print off, and I just want to draw your attention to the last one, the heel fit. This is a great way to help people who have a narrow heel and a broader forefoot, and they need that broad forefoot, so then their heel slips. Using this way to lace causes the heel cup to draw around the foot, and you get a better fit, and the heel is drawn into the heel cup so that you don't have as much slippage. And just a little mention about slippage. People are really worried about their heel moving. There should be a slight bit of movement. It's when it gets excessive that you have to worry. But a slight bit of movement is just a normal fit for a shoe. And again, I included this one as a handout, so I'm going to let you look at it. But I have found this a great way to deal with waxy or round or slippery laces. Much easier to deal with than a double bow. A cautionary note though, if it's used or you recommend it to your clients or you use it yourself, when you're walking or moving, it's great. When you're sitting down, loosen it off a little bit because you don't want to impair the circulation on the top of your foot. Laces tend to be very long, so you may want to consider buying the length of lace that's appropriate for your foot. We've talked a lot about socks, and socks are as important as your shoes. I'm going to let you look at that, but I just want to make sure that you think about socks that don't have any bunching or sagging or thick seams or darned areas. They will act just like the calluses do and cause irritation to your foot. For those people who are diabetic, you may want to turn a diabetic sock inside out if it has a thick seam at the toe, and that works for all of us if we want to lessen the impact on the top of our foot. Turn the sock inside out. You want to make sure that you have the right sock for the activity that you're doing, so no nylons in athletic shoes, no athletic socks in a heavier shoe or a nicer shoe. So make sure that they're appropriate for the activity and your foot size and not constricting at the top, and that are in breathable cotton or wool. I know my husband wears wool all summer, and I could never figure out why they weren't really, really warm. And then I realized that wool has a hollow core, and the perspiration gets sucked into the hollow core and makes them quite nice to wear even when the weather's warm. So you'll notice the next little bit, there are lots and lots of pictures, and I just want to give a shout out to the stores that provided the shoes to me. Kessler Shoes in Belleville, Tootsie's and Runner's Choice in Kingston. They've been very generous with me when I teach in the community, and so I just want to say thank you to them. It really works best if you have two pair of shoes. Both of them last longer, but I know there are budgetary constraints, so it's about thinking how it is you can make that happen for yourself. We talked about not wanting to have moisture inside the shoe, and so it can get to be 120 degrees inside that shoe, so it will be very moist. In the evening when you take your shoes off, just lift the sock liner out or lift your orthotic out as it's shown in the picture. Let it rest on the top line, and the inside of the shoe will dry out, which makes it more comfortable to wear and less likely to cause you any issues. When you're putting that sock liner or orthotic back into the shoe, make sure that you put your hand into the shoe and check to make sure nothing has fallen in there overnight. I was just with my grandchildren and put my shoes on one day, went for a walk, couldn't understand why I was having discomfort, took the shoe off, and there was the tiniest little Lego in there, and evidently the cat had dropped it in. So if I hadn't had superior feeling in my feet, I would have ended up with quite an irritation. And it's all about making sure that you're preventing problems, not having to deal with them. And at this point, probably I should say something about slippers and house shoes. My feeling is the word slipper says it all. They're not designed like a shoe, and so they can cause issues. Much better to have a house shoe rather than wear slippers. I know I'll have lots of people who disagree with me, but it's just a whole lot safer. Okay, so we're going to look at some shoes now, and you'll see that we should be looking, in order to prevent falls and to keep our balance and all that kind of thing, we should be looking at shoes that are laced or have Velcro closures or buckles or zippers. And I know when you look at those shoes at the top, you're going to say, oh, golly, my Aunt Bertha wore those. Aunt Bertha was a wise person. Maybe you should think about having a cheesecake shoe, some shoe that you wear out that's more stylish, but these shoes are your workhorse shoes, the shoes that you wear every day for doing those important tasks like housework and exercise and that kind of thing. Laced shoes probably are preferable because the shoe comes up around your foot and you have much more control with a laced shoe. But I understand that there are people who have difficulties, arthritis in the hands or hips and knee problems, or like I am with a little bit extra around my middle. Sometimes it's hard to get down to lace a pair of shoes. So you have to decide what works for you, but if you can possibly continue to use lace shoes, keep on doing it. It'll keep everything moving, tickety-boo. The shoe up on the right, upper right, is a shoe that has a extensible top. So anyone who has deformity in their forefoot, it's a really good choice because it will mold to the foot instead of pushing against the foot. The bottom two pictures I wanted to show you because we talk about having deep toe boxes that are rounded. And you can see that both of these shoes are laced, but the one on the left has a much deeper toe box than the one on the right. So you need to look at your feet. Are they thick or shallow? Are there any deformities? And how will the shoe that I'm looking at accommodate that shape and those deformities? So those are some things you need to be looking at when you're choosing a lace shoe. Even though it's the better choice, sometimes you have to narrow it down within the better choice. Rocker soles are very helpful if people have pain or discomfort at the front of the foot. The shoe is already starting. You'll notice with this shoe, there's a rocker at the heel, so as you heel strike, the shoe is already starting to move your foot forward, and then when you get to the front of your foot, the shoe is already helping you to push off. So the foot doesn't have to work so hard, you don't have to work so hard. The athletic shoe business had rocker soles for quite a long time, and now it's moving into mainstream shoe manufacturing, and it's a really good thing because we get tired doing a lot of walking, and the shoe helps tremendously. And by the way, that shoe at the top is one of the most comfortable shoes I've ever owned, and I'm pretty sure it has to do with the rocker. The next set of shoes, you should be looking for shoes that are high on the vamp or the instep. And you can see the one on the far left comes up quite high, and then the one next to it has a strap across, which will help it stay on. But the next two shoes are not very high on the vamp, and you may find it difficult to keep on your foot, and so your foot is working really, really hard. Your toes are working really hard to keep that shoe on. And if you tried that red shoe on, second from the right, you would notice there was pooking at the sides, and that happens because there's not enough shoe covering your foot. So the other thing I wanted to point out was that shoe on the left that comes up high on the vamp. Sometimes those shoes are made very wide, so it's easy to get your foot in. And if your foot is not wide, you have to be careful that you're getting the proper width in that shoe. Even though it has the quality of being high on the vamp, you need to make sure that it's not too wide for you, because you don't want your foot slipping around. Okay, so you're looking at retaining mediums. So that's the difference between a canvas shoe and a leather shoe. And foam materials, although they're probably more reasonable in price, are not very breathable. And so that temperature increases in your shoe, and then you get an increase of moisture. You want the soles of your shoes to be fairly wide so that they make a lot of contact with the ground as you're walking, and you want them to be non-slip. And again, the bases should be wide, especially through the arch area. You want that contact to happen because you want to be stable. And the picture of the shoe was to indicate 1.5-inch heels. So if people want a dressier shoe, this looks quite nice, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for people who have problems with their feet. And sometimes I call, as I mentioned about the cheesecake shoes, if you have cheesecake once a month and you're on a diet, you can wear a fancy shoe to a special occasion, but you're wearing your good supportive shoes for the rest of the time. And sometimes that's a difficult concept to get, but once people realize how comfortable a supportive shoe is, they may be kicking and screaming, but they will notice the difference. And because this is sandal season, I just thought I'd include some sandals and some good qualities about these sandals. You'll notice in the upper left, the heel is covered in the one sandal, and the toe is covered in the other sandal. So this gives people something to grab onto their foot and gives some protection at the front. People who are diabetic may want to have their toes covered up, so that might be an alternative. And the sandals in the picture on the right, you'll notice that they have lots of places where adjustment can take place. Lots and lots of us have narrower heels and broader forefeet. So if you can adjust at the heel, you can adjust it around that narrow heel, and then over the top of the instep of the foot, you can make adjustments. So for deformity or for a thicker foot, that sort of thing. Lots of sandals these days have removable footbeds, so you can add your own custom orthotic. And the sandals that are down on the bottom on the left, I threw those in because they both have already built-in support. And so if you wear orthotics all the time, this might be a choice for you because you find it difficult to put your orthotic into any sandal that you've purchased. Maybe just talk about Birkenstocks now, because lots of people wear Birkenstocks, and that's a 60-40 shoe. 40% of us cannot wear it. I know my daughter can wear them and loves them. They do not work for me. So just because they work for someone else, try them on and make sure they're working for you. If you have any sort of back issues, because they have negative heel support, that can cause excess pressure on your back, so that's a cautionary note. And frequently they do not have back straps, and you really need to have back straps. And on that same note, I know lots of us like to just slip our feet into a shoe, and so we choose clogs. I had a very bad fall about 5 years ago wearing a clog and in a hurry, and the shoe slipped off, and I came down on the edge of it and fell, and I'm still suffering from that. So better to have a shoe that comes around your entire foot. Same, also Crocs. I don't hear so many questions about them anymore, but Crocs are okay in the garden and around the pool if you're going to be walking anywhere. They're compressible material, and they will exaggerate the things that are going on with your foot that you don't want to exaggerate. So for instance, if an arch is not working the way it should, it'll just make things all that much worse. We're just going to look for a really quick minute at some of the aids that you can use. A long-handled shoehorn is a great thing to have. I have one wherever I put shoes on, in the bedroom, at the front door, in the kitchen. And make sure you have a chair when you're putting your shoes on. I've seen too many people with black raccoon eyes because they were attempting to put shoes on leaning forward and they fell forward. So chairs and long-handled shoehorns are wonderful. Elastic laces, you use the elastic lace, do your shoe up exactly the way you would with a regular lace, but then when you go to put the shoe on or off, you use your long-handled shoehorn and the shoelace expands so that you can get your foot in. And this is a great way to get around the clog business. So you've got a shoe you can slip into without worrying about it coming off really easily. I just wanted to really quickly go over some of the things that you can use to help a shoe work better for you. And I'm just going to go up here and point to these are cheaters. Cheaters, remember we talked about that deep shoe? So the deep shoe, if you need to take up some space or if you have a shoe that your heel is slipping a little tiny bit, you put that up at the front of the shoe under the shoe liner or under your orthotic, and it will take up that extra space and snug your heel back into the heel cup. This is a tongue pad, and the tongue is the part of the shoe that sits under the laces. So it has a self-adhesive back, and it would be placed on the back of the tongue, so facing your foot, and it also helps to snug your foot back into the heel cup. These three things are heel lifts, so if you have a short leg, you can put a heel lift in under the orthotic or the sock liner and attempt to even your legs out a little bit. They also work really well if you have an ankle bone that's lower and it's banging into the top line of the shoe. It will just lift your foot up. Make sure if you're doing it for that reason that you're doing it in both feet because you don't want to create a long leg. And then these are metatarsal pads. They're amazing things if someone has pain at the front of their foot. They just work miracles. These two pictures show proper placement. If you don't put them in the right place, they will hurt. But if you put them in the right place, they are amazing. This little fella right here is a no-no. People frequently use them attempting to get their heel to be snug in the heel cup, and all they do is push your heel forward. So I wouldn't recommend those at all. And this is called a ball and ring, and in the shoe business, they use it to stretch specific spots. So if you have a little hammer toe that's giving difficulty, or I have a left baby toe that seems to want to rub in every shoe I own, just stretch the leather just in that spot. A note about stretching, you're far better off if it's not a specific spot that you need to stretch the whole shoe, better off to leave that shoe on the shelf and find one that's the proper width for you. You never get a good fit, and you certainly can't make things longer. Shit. Your elbow touched. So what do I do?
Hello? Hello?
Nancy, I think we're losing you a little bit.
Okay, I'm back.
All right, good.
Okay, sorry about that. My elbow did a little number on my speakerphone. I apologize. So these are the things you need to see a foot care specialist for. Often we fight our way through the pain, and sometimes, as with that metatarsal pain, the solution to rectifying the problem is so simple. Just put a little mound in your shoe to take the pressure off. So really see someone and get the problem solved. And if you see your family doc and they don't know the answer, go to see a person who deals with feet particularly. The warning is painful feet are not normal. You need to seek help. And that's all around prevention of falls and keeping your balance and your movement. So I hope you can see from all of this that if your feet are healthy, they're not painful, they're well looked after, they're well shod with the proper footwear, that your mind is going to be a whole lot clearer and you're going to be more confident in your stepping. And your body's going to be healthy because you're not going to risk falling or banging into things or having to deal with the pain that there comes with ingrown toenails, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that you can see the relationship of your foot being your foundation and everything all the way up is connected, and how looking after your feet is really important. So just think back to those questions we talked about in the beginning: proper foot care, your shoe size, whether or not you're able to find comfortable shoes. And I hope that some of the things I talked about today will help you to change your answers to those questions and give you some really good knowledge to be able to take with you as you go forward. And I just want to give you a last little thought. Write down a couple of things that you learned today. And for each of you, it may be different, but just write them down, because sometimes when you look at what you learned, it's really impressive.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was a fantastic presentation with a lot of really practical advice that I think will benefit not only all of our participants on the line, but all of their clients as well. So thank you for that. We do have some questions that have come in during the presentation through the chat box. So I think we'll start with those. And I do invite all participants now, if you have questions for Nancy, please type them into the chat box. In a minute or two, I'll also give the chance to unmute the phone line if you'd prefer to ask your question that way. All right, so the first question: when you say to leave the use of certain tools, like razors and other sharp tools, to professionals, are the people working at nail salons included in professionals? Do you have any other recommendations for people who get pedicures at nail salons?
My advice to people is, if they have issues with their feet, health issues like diabetes or arthritis or fragile skin on their feet, to see a foot care professional. So that's a foot care nurse. My husband had an experience where he's a diabetic and he has a problem with ingrown toenails. And I know the young woman who was giving him a pedicure was being kind, but it caused a terrific infection. So if there are any issues like that, I think far better to see a foot care professional.
All right, thank you. Any advice for sort of the general population when getting a pedicure at a salon?
Make sure that the place is clean, that the people have some credentials, that the instruments are clean. Those are the sorts of things that it's the cleanliness and the knowledge that I'm really concerned about.
All right, thank you. A question from Teresa. How long would you recommend one sort of spend wearing the shoes before they actually purchase them?
Well, when I worked in the shoe store, I had people who were there sometimes an hour to 2 hours just walking around in the shoe. If you can find a shoe store that will allow you to take the shoe home and wear it at home for a few hours, that's a really good thing. Lots of shoe stores these days don't allow you to do that, but if you're lucky enough to find one, I would. You need to take what seems to be the time you need, because we're all different. Some people put a shoe on and say, oh, this is perfect, and other people just need to see. But if you have any qualms, it's not the shoe for you.
Thank you. A question from Rhonda. Good shoes can be quite expensive, so what would you suggest for someone who is on a very limited income?
A couple of suggestions. I have discovered Tootsie's, and I know it traditionally has a reputation for having really cheap shoes, but my experience has been that there are some pretty good shoes there. So as long as they satisfy, proper retaining material and all that sort of thing, they're pretty good. Also, I have asked for money and or shoes as a present for Mother's Day and Christmas and all that kind of thing. So that might be an issue. That's something you could do. Saving your income tax return, putting aside a couple of bucks a pay in order to be able to pay for a more expensive shoe. Those would be my suggestions off the top of my head.
Is there any way to get shoes covered by health insurance or OHIP?
OHIP doesn't cover shoes at all. Some insurance plans, like extended care benefits, do cover shoes, but they're becoming very sticky about it, and they have really strict guidelines. Some insurance companies now even name the manufacturers that you can buy. So you have to check your own health plan, and unfortunately OHIP doesn't see proper shoe wear, footwear as a necessity.
Do you know if there's any advocacy going on in that area?
As far as I know, no, there isn't, although with the prevalence of diabetes, who knows what's coming down the pike.
All right, interesting. Okay, a question in the chat box from Joanne. Could you explain the handout Tie One On 101, the lacing techniques? The first two pictures for wide and narrow feet don't seem to explain it very clearly.
Okay, so the wide foot is using, sometimes on shoes they have two areas where you can put your lace through. So you want to use the one that's furthest out. And then it's all about pulling the lace tight across the top of your foot for the narrow foot.
All right, Joanne, let us know if that answers your question. I think I'll give an opportunity now to unmute the phone lines. So if anyone would like to ask their question over the phone, sometimes it's a little easier or faster than typing it out, please feel free to unmute your line at this time and just jump right in. It's *7 to unmute your phone line. I'll just throw the instructions up on the screen here. *7 to unmute your phone, and then dial *6 when you're done. But please take a moment to unmute now if you'd like. All right, everyone's being shy today. That's okay. All right, a question in the chat box then from August. Hi, I have a question. Out of the blue, my great toenails are growing sideways. Any idea how to correct this? The toes have not changed, just the nails. I wear good running shoes most days. Both nails are slanting towards the rest of my toes.
This is a question for a healthcare professional, a foot care professional. I know how to do foot care, but it's not my forte. I would pass you on to someone who knows about nails and about their growth patterns. That's where I would go with that one.
So in terms of finding someone then, how would August go about finding a professional foot care person that she could speak to?
I would look in the yellow pages or word of mouth. Ask people in your in your work or whatever, if they have suggestions about where they send people for foot care, or use Google foot care nurses.
Okay, foot care. So you're looking for a foot care nurse?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. A question from Rhonda. Is there a company, she's specifically in the Kingston area, that might come in to fit shoes in long-term care for people who can't get out?
That's really an issue. I know Walkwell Shoes in Kingston did it for years and years and years. Unfortunately, the risk management people put a kibosh on that when they charged exorbitant insurance rates. And so really there isn't a company that I know of that is doing that because they just couldn't afford the insurance rates.
All right, final question for today from Juliet. Is there any brand that you would recommend specifically for wide feet?
For gentlemen Dunhams or SAS shoes, SAS stands for San Antonio shoes. For ladies, SAS shoes, you can get them in widths. New Balance shoes, you can get them in widths. Frequently athletic shoes are only in kind of a medium, and it depends on the shape of the shoe. So SAS shoes, the Keens are really wide as well, so you can look at Keens. If you're looking at a shoe that has European sizing, you need to really be careful of the shape of the shoe because they tend not to have widths. So if you can find a wider shoe, it might fit a wider foot. But SAS and Keens and New Balance, they're pretty good choices if you're looking for a wide shoe.
Perfect, thank you. I think those suggestions will help quite a few people out there struggling with wide feet. All right, so I'd like to thank Nancy very much for providing that valuable evidence-based information to help us advance our knowledge and practice around foot care today. I'd also like to thank all of our participants for joining us, for your questions and your participation today. It's been a great discussion. I'm going to ask that you please do not close the window just yet. Please wait until you've been redirected to the Level 3 lobby screen. Once you see that screen, it's safe to close the window, and a very brief evaluation survey will launch in your web browser. If you could take a couple minutes to give us some feedback, that would be much appreciated so we can continue to improve these webinars. A recording of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, as well as circulated to all the participants in the coming week or so. Please feel free to pass it along to anyone who you think might be interested. For more information about the Fall Prevention Community of Practice, please check out Loop, our online communication platform, at fallsloop.com. It's a great place for networking with colleagues, asking and answering questions, and viewing the events calendar for more learning opportunities like this. So again, we're online at fallsloop.com. All right, thank you everyone, and have a wonderful day.